How's it going, guys? It's Cameron of the Venus Theory, and in today's video we're here finally to talk about the wave arpeggio sound, the wave trap arp thing, and variations on it, and lots of cool little tips and tricks and things you can do to it to make it more cooler. So this is the sound. 3, 2, 1. So basically today I'm going to break down the absolute basics of this sound, and then I wanted to dive in a bit further to talk about some cool ideas and tips and things you can do along the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and just initialize this patch. I'm going to be using Dune 3 today, and you can do this in any synthesizer, but I do recommend Dune 3. It is badass. So without anything happening, I just made a quick little arp, you know, nothing too crazy. And that's one thing to keep in mind for these types of patterns is keep it simple, and if you do want to get more advanced with it, make sure it makes sense. Don't just play random notes in a scale and hope it works. So this is the initial patch. Cool. So the big secret that a lot of people seem to get confused with is square waves, and that's it. So change your synth to squares. That's where that computery glitchy thing comes from different harmonics and stuff. So the big thing is detune these. So we've got a bunch of detuned squares now. So let's back that off, maybe 5, and then spread them out a little bit. And this spread, in case you're wondering, is stereo spread, meaning it spreads the voices out to your left ear and your right ear. Makes it nice and wide. Okay, so now a lot of people seem to get stuck at this point because they think this is it, and that's not. And a lot of people seem to message me after they get here because they don't know what to do next, which is totally fine. So the big thing is don't overthink this. It's a very basic synth patch, and it's based on old, you know, 80s, 90s sounds. So the big thing is to play with your envelope. So the amplitude envelope here controls the amplitude of the output. Amplitude meaning volume. So if we turn the sustain down and we play with just the decay, you can hear there's a lot of different things we can do there. So now let's play with another knob, the attack knob. So you can see right there we get a nice, almost reversed sounding lead. So if we increase the decay a bit, neat. Now let's play with the one other knob, release. So there we go. Now we've got a nice little wavy arp thing, and you can play with different waveforms. Saw wave, more kind of ravey sounding thing. Triangles, a lot softer than a square. Sine wave, really, really neat stuff. Okay, so now that we've got this, the other thing to keep in mind is your pulse width. And this is basically, is it a perfect square wave or is it like a rectangle wave, I guess, to keep that simple. So basically this, if you increase this quite a bit, you can get a really, really harsh kind of digital feel. And another cool thing is to tie something to this. So in Serum or whatever, we could just tie an LFO to Oscillator 1's pulse width. So we can go ahead and up that now. Make it really quick or really slow or somewhere in between, and you can get a lot of cool stuff. You could do syncing as well. If you wanted to get really complicated, you could tie maybe that same LFO or a separate LFO to the sync. We can go ahead and do that. And now this is a pluck with quite a bit of movement and stuff to it. Okay, so now that we've got that down, there's a couple other things to keep in mind to try. So one of the big things about wave stuff in general, and a lot of kind of that modern R&B-ish stuff and things of that nature, is that a lot of what we're doing is trying to emulate analog synths, and a big component of this is oscillator drift. So Dune 3, this is actually pretty easy to set up. So we could tie an LFO in a relatively small amount to the semitone or fine control. So let's actually do fine. And if we increase LFO1 speed, you'll hear what this does, especially if I increase the amount. So it moves around, and now it's kind of weird. So this is a big thing about the analog synth world, is it's not perfectly in tune all the time. So by just giving this a little bit of variance, so maybe like this, so you can hear it go slightly sharp, slightly flat, and just giving this a really slow rate starts to sound a lot more organic. So now we could just add some quick effects. So some stuff to try is maybe just a very light distortion. This is overdrive in this case. We could add a little bit of chorus. You could add some different delays. We could try like a kind of weird 2 stereo delay thing, something like that. Mix it in fairly low. Maybe drop the feedback. Add a small-ish reverb. Now we get this really nice wave ARP thing. So, from here, the other kind of cool thing to try is messing with filters. So, your standard synth probably is just like a low-pass filter by default. Cool. So the other type of filter to try is a bandpass. So what this will do is it's basically a low and a high pass at the same time, so only a select range of frequencies will pass through. So you hear as I open this up more, what this is doing is cutting out the low end as well as the high end. So it's basically centered around this point. And the cool thing in the analog synth world is abusing filter resonance. So if you have Serum or something, you'll see that there's a big peak that'll come up in the filter. So if we abuse this, we can get it to kind of oscillate. So what you can do is kind of tune this roughly to the root note. And maybe add a bit of filter drive to that. You can get some really, really cool stuff going on. So that is a really, really good thing to keep in mind. The other way that I see people do this, or well, rather hear people do this a lot, is to use a high-pass filter. Let me grab the right one. And what they'll do is add a bit of resonance and cut off relatively high, but they'll use a saw wave. Create something like that, or something like that. There's so many small variations on this sound that you could do. I could sit here all day and talk about this. But basically that is an overview on the whole thing. Maybe one last thing to try as well is play with your filter envelope. So many small things, and that is a lot of the key to this type of sound design is If you are familiar with old analog synths and hardware synths, this should be relatively simple, and it's just about making small changes with the stuff that's available: the filters, the envelopes, the LFOs, the routing matrix, all that kind of stuff. And otherwise, if you're not familiar or have never used older hardware synths, the biggest thing to keep in mind is the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid, because there are so many ways to do this that if you overthink it, you'll just end up overcooking the sound and getting lost. So it's a lot of just, like I said, small tweaks on only a handful of different parameters. So that is it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.